Thanks, Emily. Well, we're less than 2 weeks from Nebraska's primary. But before we vote, Nebraska's Secretary of State is touring the state to make sure things are in working order.
As First Alert 6 reporter John Chapman tells us, a member of his political party has questions about the software of vote counting machines.
In October of 2020, Nebraska Secretary of State Bob Evnen stood with election officials from 3 other states to proclaim elections in Nebraska are safe and secure.
Our states are appropriate examples of how elections can be operated securely and safely.
Now, Secretary Evnen, up for re-election, is crossing the state, watching and checking the accuracy of voting machines. His opinion has not changed.
The elections in Nebraska are secure, they are accurate. Nebraska's elections are a gold standard for the country.
This year, a new law allows more people to watch Nebraska's gold standard process in action.
Here in Douglas County, there are representatives from the Douglas County Republican Party and the Douglas County Democratic Party. They're here observing this process as well, and it's that law that I supported.
Douglas County Democratic Party Chairman C.J. King has watched the voting machines before, but not this early in the process. He has confidence in the system and welcomes the new law.
Well, I think anything that helps with people being confident in our system is an improvement. I have no concerns over the ballot counting system. It's been proven time and time again how accurate they are. So, but I think, inviting the parties in, that might help some folks. So, yeah, I welcome the opportunity.
Seth Paulson is watching for the Douglas County Republicans, making sure the voting machines are secure and accurate. He says the people working in the election commissioner's office are fine, but he has a big problem with the system's software.
Actually, from my point of view, and many other people's point of view, this software and these machines are out of compliance with executive order from President Trump of last year.
So could our election be challenged?
I think so. Somebody could.
Secretary Evnen continues to say Nebraska's elections are safe and secure and thank the people that continue to make them that way.
It's our county election commissioners, our county clerks, their staffs, and their volunteers who work very hard. They're dedicated people, they're committed, and they are achieving great elections for the state of Nebraska.
In Omaha, I'm John Chapman, First Alert 6.
Accuracy checks of voting machines in the state of Nebraska happen before, during, and after every election. That includes hand-counted audits from random precincts selected by the state or county for non-statewide elections.
Well, most of